All right, everyone. Today we're going to discuss about solving systems of linear equations with three variables using the Gauss-Jordan elimination, or what we call the Gaussian elimination method. So we're going to use matrices. Matrices are rows and columns of numbers, and they're the coefficients of your linear equations. So let us begin. All right, so we have this as an example. So negative x minus 5y plus z equals 17. Negative 5x minus 5y plus 5z equals 5. 2x plus 5y minus 3z equals negative 10. Now we're going to use brackets and we are going to copy down all the variables in the brackets, and we're going to create a matrix out of this. All right, so all these answers will be here, while all the coefficients of this will be copied down here. All right, so let's just discuss this for a little bit. So negative x has a coefficient of negative 1, and you have negative 5, and you have positive 1, and then the 17. Let us now plug in and create rows of numbers for the second equation. Okay, so this negative 5 came from here. This one is from here. This is from here. And this 5 is from here. Now let's create the third row. So this 2 came from here. 5 came from here. Negative 3 is from here. And negative 10 is from here. Now, what you wanted to happen is that all of these diagonals will turn to a positive 1. You want it to be positive 1, okay, by doing the four fundamental operations. Now, also, part of this method is to ensure that this lower triangle right here are zeros. So this has to turn to 0, this has to turn to 0, and this has to turn to 0. Now, let us begin. Remember I told you a while ago that this diagonal must be changed into a positive 1. Now look at this first row right here. This is going to be easy because this negative 1 can easily be changed to a positive 1 if I multiply row 1 by a negative 1. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to do it like this. It is very important for you to put the code on the side so that you don't get lost. Also, another very critical part of this method is all the other rows that you're not changing, you must copy them down. So therefore, you must copy down row 2 and row 3 already before you even change whatever is row 1 into this formula. So let's begin by copying. So row 2 is copied down, and now row 3 is copied down. We're now going to multiply row 1 into a negative 1. So negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Negative 5 times negative 1 is positive 5. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. And 17 times negative 1 is negative 17. All right, so one thing was accomplished, and that is that this is a 1. Now we are going to, we want to turn this to a 0, okay? If we want to turn this to a 0, well, we can also divide them all first by 5, so we are going to be dealing with smaller number. That can be done as well. So let's do that. So we are just doing this in order for us to be dealing with just once, okay? So we will divide row 2 by 5, and because of that, we will just copy down row 1 and row 3. We're not touching them. All right, so rows 1 and 3 are now copied down, and I'm going to start my division by 5. So negative 5 divided by 5 is negative 1. Negative 5 divided by 5 is again negative 1, and then 5 divided by 5 is 1, then 5 divided by 5 is 1. Okay, so we got them all down, and what we want to happen now, we want this to be a 0. Now remember, this 3 should be, this lower triangle should be 0, 0, 0. So the first thing that I'm thinking, excuse me, is to make this a 0. And very good. If you're thinking of row 1 plus row 2, then you are right in order for this to be a 0. So we're going to add row 1 and 2 in order for this to be a 0. For the meantime, we're not changing row 1 and row 3 because this is what we want to change. We want this to be a 0. Therefore, copy this down, these two rows, and then put the next formula on the side like this. Okay? Again, this is our formula. We want to add row 1 and row 2 in order for this to turn to 0. And that will stay here on the second row. And again, rows 1 and 3 will be copied. All right, are you ready? Okay, so 1 plus negative 1 is a 0. Okay, so 5 plus negative 1 is a 4. Negative 1 plus positive 1 is a 0. Okay, and then negative 17 plus 1 is negative 16. And that goes here. Okay, let's take a look at this. Remember I told you a while ago that this diagonal has to turn to a 1. Now watch this. Look at this. Okay, look at this row. It sounds so easy for me to make this into a 1, and that's by dividing row 2 by 4. Okay, let's do that. Formula on the side, and then rows 1 and 3 are copied down. All right. So now let's go to row 2. So, and we will divide it by 4. You know that 0 divided by 4 is 0 still, right? So that's a 0. 4 divided by 4 is a 1, which is what we want to happen. Again, 0 divided by 4 is 0. Negative 16 divided by 4 is a negative 4. Guys, we already solved one variable, and that's the y, because this is x, y, and z. That's it. Y is negative 4. All right, but don't get too excited yet. We still have to make this into zeros right here and this into a 1 later. Okay, so let us begin. All right, notice that this is a 2 and this is a 1. Therefore, if I multiply row 1 by 2 and subtract it from row 3, then this will turn to 0, right? Because this is a 2, so 1 times 2 is 2, minus 2, and this will become 0. And that's what we want. So why don't we do that? Okay, you guys, I am going to do it right here on the top. Okay? So, here at the bottom, we're going to go ahead and continue it on the top. And what we're going to do is we are going to multiply the first row by 2. And whatever we get from that, we will subtract with row 3. Therefore, we are not touching the second row and we're not touching the first row. So go ahead and copy those down. The only one we're touching is row 3 because we want to turn this to a 0. All right, so begin copying rows 1 and 2. Let's do it. All right, so it is here now, guys, so that it's not hard for us. I had copied down whatever matrix I had below to here. So now let's begin the process. Now that we have copied down the rows that we are not touching, I am going to write down times 2 in all of these so that we can kind of remember what we're doing. All right. Well, first of all, I know some of you may be thinking, well, she said to copy down the rows that we are not touching. Some of you may think that we're touching row 1 and so asking, well, why did we copy it? No, guys, we are not touching row 1. It still is 1, 5, negative 1, negative 17. And the only reason why we are multiplying 2 onto this row is because we want to try our very best to eliminate the 2 and make it a 0. So we're using it for row 3. But we're not touching it. We're just using it in order to help row 3 have this as a 0. Okay, I hope that is clear. So let us begin the process. So now this is 1 times 2 is 2, minus 2 is now 0 right here. So this turns to a 0, all right? This becomes a 10. So 10 minus 5 is a 5, okay? This is now negative 2. Negative 2 minus negative 3, okay, take a moment, is a 1, okay? And then this is negative 34 minus negative 10 is a negative 24. All right, guys, we are almost done. We just need for this 5 to turn to a 0. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, you know what? That's very easy. Subtract the 5 here and the 5 here. So again, like you said a while ago, let's use the first row in order to get to the third row. Oops. No, guys, we have a restriction we need to follow, and that's this. The moment this 2 turns to 0, the moment this 2 turns to 0, you can no longer use the other row, okay, this row, to help out the other rows with whatever you're doing. So therefore, this is just now between this row, the second, and the third. So once again, you can no longer use row 1 if these two are already zeros. Okay, you can only use these 2 rows now. So that's a restriction I want you to remember. Please remember that and don't forget. Okay, so now let's go ahead, and for you to turn this to a 0, what we can do is multiply this row by 5 and subtract. Okay, so once again, we're only using second row. We're not touching second row, but we're using second row to facilitate that the third row now will have this as a 0. So let's begin the copying. So you're going to copy row 1 and row 2. We're not touching those. It's row 3 that we want to change this into a 0. All right, you guys, we can now make this into a 0 by following this formula, which is multiply 5 onto row 2 and subtract row 3. All right, so let's go ahead and write that down. All right, so 0 times 5 is 0, minus 0 is 0. I hope now you're seeing why we cannot touch row 1 anymore, okay? Because then that will change. Anyways, let's now go to the next one. This is going to be 5 minus 5 is 0. Yay! So now we've accomplished the triangle 0, okay? So 0 times 5 is 0, minus 1 is negative 1, negative 20, okay, minus negative 24 is positive 4. All right? We're almost done. However, at the very beginning, I told you that this should be all positive 1, and that's negative. And this is very easy fix. We're just going to multiply the row 3 by a negative 1 in order to change this to a positive 1. All right, so this is what happens if I multiply this by negative 1. It turns to positive 1, and 4 times negative 1 is a negative 4. Okay, guys, this part right here, actually, this is X, Y, and Z, okay? So this one right here gives us a Y of negative 4, and this one right here gives us a Z of negative 4. And the only thing we have to look for now is the X. All right, so for us to get the X, I'm just using equation 1, plugging in all my Y and my Z that I got. So balancing the equation, negative x, this becomes positive 20, this is negative 4 equals 17. So now negative x plus 16 equals 17, negative x is equal to 17 minus 16, which negative x is equal to 1, which therefore x is negative 1. Alright guys, I hope that you have learned a lot today. You can check your work by again plugging this in any of the equations given. So that's x, this is y, this and this is z.